No officer or enlisted man had ever seen as much action as he had. 2 world wars and a stint in Korea. But if you asked him directly, the old soldier couldn't tell you how many battles he'd fought in over the years or how many friends he'd lost. Too many to count. Now, retired at long last, he relaxes in the place he calls home, looking down on a field of green and across the wide river that flows below. As homes go, this is a good one, a fine place to welcome his family who come to visit him almost every day. In fact, there they are right now, strolling up the driveway to spend some time, share a story, and keep him up to speed on the latest news from home. The old soldier was always available during visiting hours, always, and for obvious reasons. Just last week, his beloved daughter, Susan, had stopped by to tell him his grandson had been accepted to Harvard. How about that? And just yesterday, cousin Billy brought word the old general store where he had met his wife, God rest her soul, was now a Starbucks. Oh well, time marches on. These visits from loved ones were lifelines, just like the letters he received in France all those years ago. June 5th, 1918, one day after the Battle of Belleau Wood. He was only a private back then, a teenager from Baton Rouge, among the first wave of Marines to charge into that unspeakable meat grinder on the Marne River. He was still in shock from what he had seen on that terrible day. The withering machine gun fire, the constant shelling, and the brutal hand-to-hand combat. But then, a letter from Bakersfield arrived, with his mother's writing on the front, a letter from home, which he read in a muddy trench, surrounded by dead friends. What? His kid brother had made the basketball team? When did he grow so tall? Sally, the little tomboy from down the block, was Biloxi's buttermilk festival queen? Unbelievable. And Freckles, the Cocker Spaniel, just had a litter of 10 puppies, all of which were being named in his honor and given away to good homes around Boise. With every sentence, the young Marine had felt a little more human, a little more determined to make it back home to the people he loved. Obviously, that determination paid off. Not only did he make it back from Belleau Wood, he made it back from the Ardennes, from the Battle of Ypres and Saint-Mahil, each one bloodier than the next. For his heroism, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, as well as the Victoria Cross. Unprecedented. But the old soldier was still a young man, and he was just getting started. When the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, guess who was sleeping peacefully in his bunk aboard the USS Arizona? He was a lieutenant by then, one of 1,500 sailors assigned to the mighty battleship when a torpedo bomb fell from the sky and sent them all toward the bottom of the Pacific. Somehow, he had made it back to the surface, only to find the ocean burning with thousands of gallons of gasoline and littered with hundreds of his shipmates, burning to death in the salty brine. It's a miracle that anyone survived that terrible morning. And yet, just 6 months later, there he was again, in the Coral Sea, and then again at the battles of Midway, Corregidor, Mindanao, and Luzon. After that, it was back to Europe, where he stormed the beaches of Normandy. Fought the Battle of the Bulge, and distinguished himself at Anzio. Through it all, no matter where the war raged, those letters from home always found him. Little lifelines that reminded him of why he was over there in the first place. His family could never know how much that meant to him or how much their visit today would lift his spirit. The old soldier's final battle had taken place in Korea, 14 November 1950, the Chosin Reservoir. A cold front from Siberia sent the temperature plunging to 36 degrees below zero. He was a captain by then, commanding a few good men who were slowly freezing to death around him. It was the bloodiest battle he'd ever seen, even though the blood of his wounded men froze before it had a chance to flow. Again, he never expected to find himself among the survivors, the frozen chosen, as they were called. But neither did he expect a visit from the President of the United States, who had come to see him during visiting hours and proudly declared that there would never be another soldier like him. As his loved ones draw near, the guards step aside so that they can give him the latest updates from Biloxi, or Boise, or Baton Rouge, or was it Bakersfield? Honestly, it's hard to keep it all straight. He's old, after all. An old soldier whose extended family includes every dead American who never made it home, and all of the loved ones they left behind. The president was right. There will never be another soldier like him, because today, every soldier's DNA is kept on file, so his or her remains, no matter how small, can be positively identified. Thus, the old soldier really is the last of his kind. A legendary warrior who everybody has heard of, but nobody knows. A faceless hero who looks down on a field of green and the Potomac River that flows below. There, in a place called Arlington, you can find him still, waiting to greet the visitors who stand in line to see him, even as he relaxes for eternity in the tomb he calls home. The tomb of the unknown soldier. Anyway, that's the way I heard it. But to God. You know my favorite part about that inscription? Nobody knows who wrote it. At least Google doesn't. An unknown author writes the inscription on the headstone of the unknown soldier.
Unknown also, we don't know them all, but we owe them all. Unknown.
Anonymous. That guy could really turn a phrase. Yeah, that's, have you been to Arlington?
I have.
Have you stood there?
I have.
It's different, right?
Yeah.
What struck you about it?
You know, it was one of those kind of moments that you've talked about on the show before, one of these kind of 6th, 7th, 8th grade social studies moments. My mother and her sister took my brother and I and my two cousins, roughly the same age. We drove all the way from Georgia to Washington, D.C., and we did the whole thing down the mall to Arlington. We did, all of the sites of Washington, D.C. as a young kid. And I remember it to this minute like it was yesterday.
Yeah, there's something about a cemetery. On Veterans Day, it's probably 10 years ago now, I posted a photo of a headstone that had Roe written on it. R-O-W-E. And it just struck me, it's like, wow, to see my name on a headstone. And as it turns out, it was the grave of a guy named Nick Rowe and a cousin named Nick, different Nick. This Nick Rowe happened to be a prisoner of war who wrote the escape manual that is still used by the armed forces today on how to escape. And it went kind of crazy on social. And it just struck me watching this. It's like the things you see engraved in stone do have a way of etching themselves back into you in some way. And that tomb, that memorial, that story for me, I think that's certainly the only story I've ever wrote where the reveal is everyone, a composite, you know. This story was not really about the tomb of the unknown. It was literally about resting homes and nursing homes and retirement communities where living people wait to be visited. They wait, many of them in vain. And it's so sad to me. You know, my mom and dad live in a great retirement community, and there's a couple thousand people there, and they're part of a community. It's robust and active, and I love that. But the first time I went to see them, I was there late in the evening, walking down these hallways, you know, and walking past these apartments, and you know, people inside just, you know, waiting for friends or family to come and see them in their 80s, their 90s, some in their hundreds. And that's just, it's so poignant, you know, to be alive and to be waiting to be visited versus to be dead and to be visited and to be not there at all, dead or alive, and have people come to see you. And there's just something otherworldly about it. And the fact that that tomb, that place, that sacred place is guarded 24/7. That's sort of the ultimate, honor.
Writing this one is an outlier. You don't normally tell a story about many. You tell a story about one particular person. The reveal in this case is thousands of people. And this one had to hit differently for you in some way. How did you find this style, this approach that you wrote from your podcast, Story Behind the Story?
This one was actually suggested to me by a friend of mine, a woman named Susan. Just thought it would be a challenge as a writing exercise to stay in this form and try and come at it that way. As I got into it, I did start to think about just the business of visiting, the business of showing up. Like I wanted it to be as much a tribute to the people who visit as to the empty tomb and all that it symbolizes. So I love what your production guys did with this. You just see people coming, and they're not grieving. They're showing up. They're being present. And you know, in a Zoom world, I just find something really kind of great about that. And also I think the letters rhyme in a way. Remember, you know, before Korea and going back, there were many thousands of unknown casualties, bodies that never made it home, and so many buried overseas, and so many just mysterious. They vanished, right? It was a very common thing. And to think about the letters that went back and forth during the First and Second World War, it's the patient thing again, right? Like, I want to send you a note, you know, I'll grab my phone, I'll fire it off, boom. I did this with you 3 months ago. You were in Israel. I sent you a note. You hit me back 6 seconds later. That's the world we're in now. We don't need patience, not really. But those guys in trenches, days, weeks, months, those letters are lifelines. And they come and they're handwritten. I mean, if that doesn't just, I mean, what that must have meant, I think we're an entire generation now that just can't even relate to it. The patience that took, and everything was slower. and just for the ones left behind, you know, the pain of not knowing. And where does the catharsis in the story come? Where do you go? If there's no grave to visit, what do you do with all of that pain and sadness? The Tomb of the Unknown is a wonderful place because it brings people together from every state that have a thing in common. A sad thing, but among them they have something else in common too. They show up. That's pretty great.
Are you ready to?
It wasn't 30 minutes ago that your mom called, and you were on the phone with your mom, Peggy, and you know, there's a part of you that needed this story from that angle too. You're
Yeah.
mama's boy.
Oh yeah, yeah. You take it. If your mom calls, you take the call. If she called right now, I'd take it.
Of course you would.
No, I'd put it on speaker and I'd hold it right here.
Yeah.
Embarrass her to no end. You never know what that woman's going to say. Yeah, you know, visit is a nice word, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like you've seen it on so many signs. Visitor parking, visitor entrance, visiting hours. We're going to set some time aside where you can come and be there, actually be there in the flesh, you know? Yes, it's a beautiful and respectful and honorable thing to do in Arlington, but while we're alive, while we're fogging a mirror, while we're walking around, you know, who can you visit? Who needs a visit? I said to you earlier, you know, I don't go to church every week, but every decent pastor I've known spends time between Sundays in hospitals, in homes, seeing the shut-ins, you know, taking advantage of those hours that are set aside for a visit. It's a beautiful thing in life and in death.
We could do this show, Mike, you comfortably in your home, me comfortably in my home. We could, technology exists. We could be in panels side by side.
Oh, yeah.
But there's something about
right
sitting together here in the barn and breaking down some, let's call them old-fashioned sentiments, but, you know, kind of needing to be unpacked, and you're good at it.
How much time we got left?
You got 2 minutes.
So, I mentioned to you once at the Marine Corps ball, they have a small table set aside with an empty chair for the ones that didn't come home, you know, and that was on my mind a little bit, you know, because before the Tomb of the Unknown, the families needed to find a way to commemorate, and they needed a place to go. They needed some way to articulate that. And I remember, I was just thinking, watching this, there was a song written shortly after the Civil War called Vacant Chair. Have you ever heard of this?
No.
This was very common, apparently, in the late 60s, 1870s. Families would have dinner, and they would set the place every night, and they would leave the empty chair there. That was how they did it. I wish I could remember the song. It's some. We will meet, but we shall miss him. There will be one vacant chair. We will linger to caress him as we say our evening prayer. I mean, it's so impossibly poignant. And when you talk about real sentiment, and when you talk about a real connection, a real visit, we're so desperate for it, we'll commune with an empty chair. We're so empty for it, we'll fly across the country and stand shoulder to shoulder with strangers in front of an empty tomb that's guarded 24/7 by the best of the brightest. We shouldn't lose sight of